Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anindia Upadhyay. I am completing my PhD at the moment at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at National University of Singapore. I have worked on energy transition before this. In various roles, I have looked at energy transition and climate policies. And even in my research, I am studying energy transition. Transition governance and policy experimentation is my focus area. And when Anil Nair ji gave me this opportunity to kind of come here and speak on steel industry or in a steel conference, I thought maybe I can share lessons from the wins in renewable energy industry for the steel industry, and it could be a different perspective from what everybody is sharing. So I hope you find it useful. So whenever we speak of transitions in sectors, we tend to overtly focus on the technological aspect. However, I want to say that transitions are heavily institutionally driven kind of processes, and institutional software lays the rules of the game. And from the renewable energy experience, we have broadly kind of conclude that institutional software, the presence of rules and norms kind of precedes technology and creates the starting conditions for sectoral transition towards a specific direction. It lays down targets and frames end goals early on and very clearly. In spite of kind of early framing of roles, institutional software kind of ensures that there is flexibility and anticipatory outlook whenever transitions are designed, and it is open to policy experimentation. And finally, it entails initial mechanisms to manage risks to various stakeholders. And with the laying out of such institutional software, it's only then that the technological hardware can play. So, okay, let's look at the case study of renewable energy industry evolution in India. India has become the fourth largest RE installer globally, and if you compare with 2014, India was nowhere on such a map. So, if we just look at the solar success story from approximately 3 gigawatt installation in 2014 to approximately 150 plus gigawatts now, I can probably kind of divide this whole thing into two parts. The technological hardware is, solar modules, storage, battery, transmission system, green corridors, and then the institutional software that enables deployment can be robust targets, mission level targets, reverse auctions driven by a nodal agency, mandatory requirement for states to procure a minimum amount of renewable energy through RPOs, payment security mechanism, government-led experimentation, and government-led public procurement. Observations from RE industry. I have two observations about the transition. So the renewable transition succeeded not because policymakers chose a perfect technology, whether it was solar or wind, but because the institutional mechanisms to allow to choose which technology would win existed. Also, the institutional software allowed markets to develop. The targets given allowed finance to kind of follow the target trajectory, and risks were managed by various stakeholders and coordination, central coordination. And the second observation is whenever hardware moved faster than software, there were pitfalls. So I think there are many lessons from the RE industry, but I have three quick lessons that could probably be used by the steel industry as it transitions to kind of a cleaner industry. So the first institutional software, as I would call it, that existed for the renewable energy industry to make it kind of evolve faster was government as the first buyer. And Solar Energy Corporation of India was a nodal agency which aggregated demand from various states and central agencies. There were power purchase agreement that it kind of gave them, which it gave developers as a credible counterparty. Now, in spite of all this, there were some pitfalls that the DISCOMs, our distribution companies, were kind of still have poor financial health, and they were unable to pay on time to renewable energy developers. There was chronic non-compliance by states in buying a minimum amount of renewable energy, and there was constant renegotiation of tariffs by several states, which created investor uncertainty. And now what I want to say is that each of these pitfall was a failure of institutional software lagging kind of behind deployment, not a technology failure. And this is a kind of lesson or an observation that transitions are can be guided by. And so the learnings for the green steel sector is that, I mean, there was a few questions because power is just one singular commodity, but steel has so many segments and so many use cases. So can there be kind of a demand aggregator equivalent mechanism for various product segments who can credibly assure green steel procurement to avoid coordination costs for the industry? And a related concern is how to activate private demand on carbon intensity grounds, how to make private sector willing to pay for green steel, which has a green premium. Then there's the L1 bidder conundrum, and all renewable energy developers were offering the cheapest green energy. So the lowest bidder automatically means the greenest option in the renewable energy industry. But in the steel industry, L1 may not be the greenest. And translating what is green L1 as, for government procurement mandate will also depend on the interpretation of procurers, how NHAI or NMDC kind of incorporate in their procurement templates, how to kind of what counts as green for them. So there needs to have also standardized protocols for procurement of green steel. And so the big question that remained was that will government procurement remain a statement of intent or a real market creator in the steel industry, which has got so many products and so many kind of procurers. Second institutional software for me is targets and markets. So in the renewable energy industry, big targets, mission mode targets was really the first step. In 2015, our renewable energy targets were kind of set at 175 gigawatt by 2022, which was kind of unthinkable at that point in time because we had a small solar target for 2022 at 20 gigawatts, and nobody could think that by 2022 or within 7 years from 2015, we could actually scale up to 100 gigawatt. So on one hand, there were targets, and on the other hand, there was this flexibility on whatever kind of module, turbine, mounting structure the market wanted to choose. So there was flexibility to the companies, to developers to choose the kind of technology which was most cost effective and suitable. And the targets were combined with a market architecture of centralized reverse auctions, following a trajectory to meet policy goals. Now, because we had this huge 175 gigawatt target by 2022, there was a bidding pipeline, and it gave a clear visibility to financing institutions as well. So India's targets and markets shaped global discourse on climate action and showed India as a climate leader. Applying this to the green steel, first and foremost, the green steel taxonomy kind of embodies the climate mission, and it is a starting point much like RE targets in 2015. So it's not something impossible, as has been repeatedly said in this conference. However, the markets bit of the institutional software and institutional mechanism to transparently discover green premium for green steel through green tenders or something is kind of missing right now. And while RE targets were internally focused in the energy sector, and the power will be consumed domestically, green steel is very different because as it does have a trade exposure. So there is no global standard for green steel, as Aditi also mentioned. So many different countries, so many different kind of definitions for what green or responsible or net zero steel is. And so so our taxonomy needs to speak with the global standards. and it has consequences for trade, and especially there's a dilemma for mid-tier companies if their investments in greening offer guaranteed trade benefits, and how can these standards help shape global discourse and not just a position of catching up for India, as was the case in renewable energy, where India did shape global climate discourse and tariffs and things like that. So the taxonomy sets the direction, but to fulfill its potential, it needs a market architecture to discover the green premium and a trade strategy that helps shape global standards. My last kind of learning on institutional software is about government-led pilots and experimentation. So I'll quickly take up the example of ultra mega solar park. It was a public-private partnership with World Bank financing. So basically, this was a 750 megawatt solar park, really big, came up in 2007. It was a PPP. There was multilateral financing, cheap loans for developers. It was plug and play, where land was acquired by the government, transmission was provided by the government, open access was, kind of procurement of power was arranged. Developers just had to come and slap their solar panels together, and that's why it yielded the lowest tariffs at that point in time. So this experiment was a case of institutional innovation, and that's why I call it part of institutional software, because the government was very much involved, and learnings were there for the entire sector, and some bits could be scaled up, not all, which shows that in a policy experiment, not everything is replicable, and the industry can pick and choose what is useful on a normal day and what is possible. And for green steel, the learnings is that if pilots have an element of government-led policy experimentation, the learnings are open to all, and they demonstrate what's deployable for the whole sector. Purely corporate pilots may or may not help industry potential for scaling up. Most importantly, pilots help avoid technology lock-ins prematurely, because you can see with small investments what's working, what's not working. For the green steel, the design of pilots is therefore a policy choice, not just a technology choice. Who runs them, who learns from them, who owns the results will determine whether India builds institutional software or just like a bunch of corporate experiments which sit with the particular corporates. So I am done. So I have three main conclusions. Green steel procurement could face fragmented demand issues unless specifications are standardized across tender templates of procurers. Coherent demand signals to producers cannot emerge from hundreds of procurement decisions made in isolation by so many procurers. The second one is differentiated pilot tenders by star rating or technology to discover best prices and technological fits. Pilots need to answer not just the feasibility question, but also the replication question, what the entire sector can do under normal conditions. So the takeaway before I thank you is that green steel has a limited time opportunity to build an institutional software quickly before the technological hardware gets logged in, before billions are committed to specific technology, and before procurement rules are set in stone. The window to get the institutional software right is now, and it is shorter than it looks. Thank you.